Stop following my son, you lowlife. He's not here anymore.
3 years after breaking off our engagement, I ran into Georgie, my former father-in-law, at the hospital. He yelled at me right away. I haven't seen Rick since that day. I managed to reply, but Georgie's scowl didn't change.
Don't lie, you stalker. Because of you, Rick had to quit this place.
Dr. Knowles, please lower your voice. You're scaring the patients, and this woman is... Other doctors tried to calm Georgie down, but he took his frustrations out on me.
Rick suddenly quit this hospital. My son, who never defied me, had to leave because you wouldn't stop following him.
Wait a minute. I told you I haven't seen him since that day. Rick left on his own accord.
Don't make me laugh. It's all your fault. Because of you, a child of a worthless mother, my son started defying me. My wife was so shocked she left me. You ruined my family.
There's no point talking to this man any longer. Not only did he insult my mother, but he also blamed me for his son and wife leaving him, completely unaware of how much he had been stifling them. I was furious. Ignoring the red-faced Georgie, I walked away.
Hey, we're not done talking.
Just as Georgie grabbed my shoulder, a startled voice rang out. My name is Liliana. My life changed dramatically when my father passed away suddenly when I was in high school. My mother became depressed and her health deteriorated. Carrying an indescribable sense of anxiety, I decided to start working right after high school to support my family and my younger brother's future. Still, I was fortunate with my work relationships. The law firm where I worked as a secretary during the day had a good atmosphere, and the boss was very kind to me. The pub where I worked at night was run by a couple and frequented by nice regulars. I loved the homey atmosphere and the meals the owner cooked. Then, a few years after I started working, it was an ordinary Friday. How unusual, a young person coming in alone. The pub's clientele was mainly people in their 40s and older. But that day, a man who looked to be in his 20s, around my age, came in alone. While other customers were enjoying their meals and drinks, this man looked unhappy. I even heard him sigh a few times. He stood out because we rarely had customers close to my age, and he had a gloomy aura. From that day on, he became a regular, coming in every second and fourth Friday. He introduced himself as Rick Knowles. Rick usually ate in silence and left after about an hour, but gradually he started talking to me and the owners and stayed longer. Rick continued to visit on those Fridays, making small talk before leaving. I started looking forward to the Fridays when he would come in. About a year after Rick started coming to the pub, he asked me out on a date. I had been working nonstop since high school, and love seemed like a distant dream. It was then that I realized I had feelings for Rick. I was thrilled when Rick asked me out. After a few dates, we decided to become a couple. By then, my younger brother had started college, so I had a bit more time for myself. I didn't know what Rick did for a living until we started dating. He told me he was a medical resident at a private university hospital. That explained why he always seemed so down. His family was full of doctors, and his father, also a surgeon, worked at the same hospital. Apparently, he didn't get to choose where he worked. His father took great pride in their long line of doctors and looked down on anyone who wasn't a surgeon. He also held a powerful position at the hospital.
You're destined to take over the surgery department. You should be able to handle this much,"
his father would say, always demanding more from Rick. Under his father's watchful eye and constant pressure, Rick was struggling. I encouraged him because I genuinely admired his dedication. "You're your own person, Rick. You don't have to follow your dad's path to be a great doctor. You're already working so hard."
"Thank you, Liliana. Hearing you say that lightens my load."
Even though we'd only been dating for a few months, Rick's commitment was intense. He barely had time to rest, always studying. His only free time was on the second and fourth Fridays, and our occasional dates. Despite the immense pressure from his father, Rick never slacked off his duties as a doctor, committed to saving lives. That's why I didn't mind our limited time together. In fact, seeing Rick work so hard inspired me to set my own goals. "Boss, I've decided. I'm going to become a lawyer. I've even started studying a bit."
"Great! If that's the case, I'll support you all the way. If you have any questions, just ask."
I'd been considering it for a while, especially since my boss had suggested it before. Now, I was committed to becoming a lawyer. Rick was doing his best to save lives as a doctor. To be worthy of him, I wanted to be helpful to people too. So I started preparing for the bar exam. I'd seen legal documents before, but studying them made me realize how much I didn't know. There were times when I felt like giving up, but Rick would say,
"Let's keep pushing through together."
He never laughed at me for aiming high, even though I only had a high school diploma. Though our goals were different, it felt like we were in this struggle together. A few years after we started dating, Rick, now more confident as a doctor, proposed to me. I was so happy that tears started flowing from my eyes. I accepted his proposal right then and there. But a new challenge awaited me: meeting his parents. I'd heard that his mother, Catherine, was a kind and gentle person, but his father, Georgie, was quite the opposite. Even Rick, a surgeon, faced immense pressure from his father. So I was filled with anxiety about whether a high school graduate like me would ever be accepted. Still, I want to be accepted. Nervous but determined, I headed to Rick's family home. I had recently passed the preliminary bar exam. Passing this exam proves that you have the equivalent skills of someone who has completed law school, which is a requirement for becoming a lawyer. Knowing I had passed gave me a boost of confidence. When Rick and I arrived at his home, his parents welcomed me warmly, contrary to my fears. Both Catherine and Georgie were smiling, which eased my tension a bit, but that relief was short-lived. Georgie immediately started grilling me about my education and family background. When I answered, he became furious.
"So you're saying you didn't even go to college?"
Yes. My father passed away when I was in high school."
"That's irrelevant. Didn't your mother make sure you went to college? Unthinkable. Marrying into our family is out of the question." "Dad, Liliana has been working multiple jobs since high school to support her family. You can't just..." "Quiet. You have no say in this. Bringing a woman like her into our home. We'd be the laughingstock of the community."
"Georgie, that's too harsh." Catherine softly interjected, but Georgie was unstoppable.
"Our family has a long history of producing doctors. Marrying a woman like you would tarnish our reputation."
I may be a high school graduate, but I'm working hard to become a lawyer. I've even passed the preliminary bar exam. Desperate for his approval, I mustered the courage to talk back. But Georgie's expression didn't change.
So what? You're still a high school graduate. I won't accept a woman like you as my son's wife. Leave this house immediately.
I don't remember how I got home. When I came to, I was sitting in my living room. Multiple missed calls and messages from Rick were on my phone.
I'm really sorry about today. I'll try to convince them to accept us. I'm sorry for putting you through this.
Although many comforting words arrived, my mind was made up. I wasn't ready to be with Rick. The idea of marrying him seemed like a fairy tale. Rick, you're already doing great as a doctor. You'll eventually break free from your father's control. Keep pushing forward. I can't be there to support you, but I'll always be cheering for you. I sent that message and chose to walk separate paths. 3 years passed. I was on my way to a particular place, my steps heavy, because that place was the hospital where Rick worked. If I run into Rick, I'll try to smile. But if I encounter Georgie, the thought weighed heavily on my mind. No, I'm here for work today. I kept telling myself to stay focused as I walked into the hospital. But then my worst fear came true. Georgie appeared before me. He seemed to notice me almost as soon as I noticed him. Leaving the doctors who were surrounding him, he walked over to me and started yelling with a face full of anger.
Stop clinging to my son. He's not here anymore.
What? Caught off guard by his sudden outburst, I was momentarily speechless. I haven't seen Rick since that day. I managed to say, but Georgie's scowl didn't change.
Don't lie, you stalker. It's because of you that Rick had to leave this place. Dr. Nels, please lower your voice. You're scaring the patients. And this lady is...
The surrounding doctors tried to calm Georgie down, but he continued to lash out at me.
Rick suddenly said he's quitting this hospital. My son who never defied me. It's because you were clinging to him that he had no choice but to leave.
Wait a minute, I told you I haven't seen him since that day. If he left, it was his decision.
That's impossible. Rick changed because of you. Even my wife started defying me because of him.
Don't blame me for your wife's actions too. Don't you think you're at fault here? My frustration was mounting, and my voice grew louder. The atmosphere among the surrounding doctors was tense, but Georgie continued to look down on me.
Don't make me laugh. It's all your fault. My son started defying me because of you, a child of a worthless mother. My wife was so shocked she left me. You destroyed my family.
There's no point in talking to this man any longer. Not only did he insult my mother, but he also blamed me for his son and wife leaving him, completely oblivious to how much he had been oppressing them. My anger reached its peak. Ignoring Georgie, who was red in the face, I walked on.
Hey, we're not done talking.
Just as Georgie grabbed my shoulder, a flustered voice rang out.
Stop this at once.
I turned toward the voice and saw a middle-aged man standing there. Georgie immediately straightened his lab coat upon noticing the man.
Director, thank you for taking the time to come here. I'll make sure today's lecture goes well.
Georgie had apparently retired from this hospital a while ago and was now working part-time and giving lectures. He was happily discussing today's lecture topic. After finishing his conversation with the director, Georgie turned to me and said loudly enough for everyone to hear,
You're still here. A high school graduate with only one parent has no business being here. Leave immediately.
He had just said,
"We're not done talking."
but now he was telling me to leave? Perhaps he wanted to show off in front of the director, but it completely backfired. Georgie, how dare you say something so rude? Besides, I didn't come here to see you. I came to see her.
What?
Caught off guard by the unexpected words, Georgie looked stunned. The director shot him a glare filled with anger. She's the attorney handling the lawsuit this hospital is currently facing. How dare you treat her so rudely?
A lawyer? Her?
Enough! If you continue to be disrespectful, there will be consequences.
Wait, director, there must be some mistake. She's just a high school graduate and from a single-parent home. How could she possibly become a lawyer and ruin my family?
Georgie seemed to be trying to convince himself that I couldn't be a lawyer, but the director was telling the truth. After that incident, I passed the bar exam and became an attorney. About 6 months ago, this hospital was sued by a patient's family for alleged medical malpractice. I was called in as the lead attorney, something Georgie, who had retired, was apparently unaware of. Despite the director's warning, Georgie continued to belittle me. The director confronted him fiercely. Didn't you understand what I said? If you're rude to her, you won't get off lightly.
Director?
Georgie looked overwhelmed. Realizing he was in trouble, his face turned pale. The director continued with undeniable authority. Today's lecture is canceled. You will never be invited back as a speaker. Furthermore, you are banned from any further involvement with this hospital.
What? Wait, what do you mean, banned?
Don't you understand? You're fired! Fired! At the word fired, Georgie collapsed to his knees.
Director, this is the only place I have left. My son and wife are gone, and this is the only place where I feel I have a purpose. Please, anything but firing me.
That's not my concern. I'm not foolish enough to employ an unreasonable doctor for such reasons.
What? Without me, the surgery department won't function, right? Is that okay?
That's only your opinion. The surgery department will function just fine without you. Let this be a lesson. Overconfidence can be your downfall. The director said only that and left Georgie, who was in shock as he led me away. Afterward, it seems Georgie was officially fired. He was also shunned by his junior doctors and has been living in isolation ever since. He tried to find another job, but his bad reputation preceded him, and he ended up opening his own practice. However, rumors spread that he judged people based on their education and family background, and he couldn't attract any patients. As for me, I won the medical lawsuit. Not only did I gain confidence, but my reputation as a strong attorney in medical issues also grew. During this time, Rick showed up at my law firm. Facing me, he apologized. I heard from the director. I'm really sorry for the discomfort my father has caused you, both 3 years ago and now. There's nothing for you to apologize for, Rick. Rick looked somewhat relieved. He told me what he had been up to since that day 3 years ago. Now he's living with Catherine, working at a new hospital, free from Georgie's control, and doing his best every day as a doctor. Listening to Rick's story, I felt a sense of relief. I was happy to hear that both of them had escaped Georgie's control and were living fulfilling lives. Do you remember, 3 years ago, you told me I had the strength to break free from my father's control? Yes, I do. Those words have stayed with me and gave me the courage to leave my father. They've been with me ever since. I had no idea my words meant so much to you." As I said this with a shy smile, Rick looked at me with serious eyes.
"I know this might sound convenient given the circumstances, but would you consider starting over with me?"
"Rick, if it were me 3 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been able to accept. But now I have confidence in myself." "Thank you. I look forward to our future." And so we decided to start our lives anew. I'm sure many challenges await us, but I believe that together, as we are now, we can overcome any obstacle.